All right, so we've got quite some good news today, actually. It's really good news because it looks like Stop Killing Games has actually gained some progress. And I'm not talking just any progress, I'm talking substantial progress. Because since the last time I covered it, there was stuff such as the petitions that went really well, and there's been hearings inside the EU. We've gone pretty well so far from what I've been reading. So that's been going well. However, in America, which is a really big consumer base, Stop Killing Games has gotten so much momentum to the point where in California, it's actually looking to pass at least the game protection bill, which is really, really good. Because mind you guys, if you don't know, if you're not aware with some legalese, a bill takes forever to get going, and I mean forever to get going. So the fact that it made as much progress as it did within like this year alone is really good. And it just goes to show you that there's a lot of demand for this kind of stuff. But let's just do a bit of a recap before we keep going, because there's a lot of stuff we have to get into, and fortunately, I gotta get you all up to speed. So why did this really start? Well, essentially, there's this game called The Crew. And so Ubisoft dropped The Crew back in what, 2014-ish. So in about maybe like 9, 10 years after the game was released, they came out and said, "Oh, you can no longer play this game anymore because we just don't want to support it. So go on to The Crew 2 and you can have fun with that." Now here's the problem. You see, if you pay for a game, right, that first of all can work offline because The Crew had offline capability, and you bought it, by law you should own it, right? Okay, you pay $80 for a game, you own it. However, especially now, especially with digital games, what you basically own is you're basically saying you own a license, okay? And that's not communicated to you, but that's what it is. So a lot of game publishers are being like, well, you paid for it and we still technically own it, so that's where we're at right now. And sadly, The Crew went down. But the ironic part is that even after some servers shut down, there is a lot of fan projects out there that can revive a game or keep a game somewhat alive, even if it's for 20 people or it's a peer-to-peer connection, like so be it. And matter of fact, actually, in the case of The Crew, there's actually something called The Crew Unlimited, where people took the 1.0 version of the game and they literally made it from the ground up. Or not made it from the ground up, but it's like they still have it out there. And the truth of the matter is that literally every single game that you buy, maybe except maybe like multiplayer games, has a 1.0 version that can be shipped to a disc. Most games don't really do that nowadays, but that's still there. So that's really, really, really a massive problem when it comes down to especially game publishers. So Ross from Accursed Farm decided to take it upon himself to stop this movement of stop killing games. Of course, there's many, many, many other backers, but Ross is one of the figureheads. So that's where all the attention is sort of at. So now that you're up to speed, okay? And don't forget as well, there's a lot of other games that have been suffering under the stuff, but The Crew is really the one that put it on the map. Now, let's take a quick look at this article before we get into it. And so here it says that the Stop Killing Games movement, which advocates for the right to continue playing games after service termination, has achieved a significant legislative milestone in the US. The California State Assembly has passed the Protect Our Games Act, a bill centered on protecting user rights after a game's service ends. According to the overseas media outlet Automation, the California State Assembly passed Bill AB 1921, the Protect Our Games Act, on the 27th local time with a vote of 43 to 16. The bill requires digital game publishers to maintain an environment where games remain accessible even after service is discontinued. Now, unfortunately, it's mostly focused on digital games, but we take what we can get. And the fact of the matter is that because digital games are so accessible, a lot of publishers will push the needle more and more to see what they get out of it. So that's why you notice, say, you buy a game and you see the service is not exactly up to par, because, when it's a digital game, they're not exactly a big fan of keeping integrity per se. And even then, there's some games that require, even if you have the disc, they need you to have an online connection, which is by the way one of the stupidest things ever on the planet. But moving along, this bill is closely tied to the ongoing debate over game preservation that has persisted for several years. The controversy began in 2024 when Ubisoft shut down its racing game, The Crew, by terminating server operations. Ubisoft effectively blocked purchasers from accessing the game itself, prompting some users to raise questions: did we buy the game or just a license to use it? So we're not gonna recap it everything because we already recapped earlier, but it just kind of goes over that stuff. So let's take a look at the actual bill itself, because this is where it gets very, very interesting. So there's some other aspects to it, but the part I really want to focus on, at least particularly in this document, is the fact that this, it says here, this bill with regard to digital games first available for purchase or re-release for purchase on or after January 1st, 2027, and subject to certain exceptions, would require a digital game operator to communicate specified information to purchasers and prospective purchasers of a digital game 60 days before the operator ceases to provide services necessary for the ordinary use of the game, and beginning on the date an operator ceases to provide services necessary for the ordinary use of the game, requires the operator to provide the purchaser with an alternate version of a patch or update to or a refund for the game as provided, and prohibit the operator from selling, leasing, or otherwise distributing a version of the game that cannot be used by a purchaser independent of services controlled by the operator. The bill would authorize the Attorney General or District Attorney to bring a civil action for violation of these provisions. And you have to keep in mind, especially in America, you can definitely sue anybody for anything. So the fact that they're opening the fact that you can open up a civil case for you losing a game is insane to me. And so keep in mind, like, for example, the game you're watching, I'm playing Gundam Dynasty Warriors 2. Imagine this game, which is actually preserved pretty decently, was an online only game and I was rating other players, okay? Imagine I paid maybe, this game's old, but maybe like say $70. Yeah, I paid $70 for it. Imagine I'm playing this game, which is like probably almost 20 years old at this point. Imagine it gets cut one day. That's my playtime, and that's something that I paid for. Now, mind you, this is played through like an emulator, so because this game's really hard to get. But regardless, that's what I'm saying here. So it's just insane to me that I want to make a purchase, and the fact that it won't let you go through that, and it'll just stop you is crazy to me. And if you keep going down further into the paper, it says here, the following shall apply to a digital game first available for purchase or release purchase on or after January 1st, 2027. If you actually keep looking down into how it breaks down into like the 60 days, it says here, a date on which services necessary for the ordinary use of the digital game will cease, any services that will no longer be provided by the operator, any game features that will no longer be available to the purchaser, any known security risks that may result from the cessation of services, how the purchaser can continue to use the digital game or obtain a refund pursuant to paragraph 2. That is very huge, because remind you guys that, especially with publishers, they want you to essentially not have to refund the game if you don't have to. And that's really when you want to hit them, like the pockets especially, because think about this, right? We can go back to Gundam Dynasty 2, for instance. Imagine I paid $70, all right, and this game's going to go down in a hypothetical. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to refund it. They don't want you to refund it. That's a huge chunk. And even now, with this being added into it, this will definitely help, not help, but this will definitely change how video games are made. Because if you guys don't know, especially like now, video games are some of the most like expensive things to like make. It's actually ridiculous, at least in the West. I know some other areas it's a little bit better, but still, regardless, it's insanely difficult to make because there's many layers to it. You have to pay engineers, programmers, blah blah blah, marketing, all that jazz. Actually, even some licenses you have to pay for as well. So that's what will help us, deal with this, because guess what? Instead of having to drop, $1 billion for a game like in GTA 6, maybe you can cut down and make it a bit more sizable. Now, GTA 6 is just an example, but regardless, we can actually keep going here by saying a digital game operator shall communicate the information required by subparagraph A by doing both of the following: notifying purchasers directly through the operator's digital game, posting the information publicly on the operator's internet website. And that's very important because for the most part, imagine you do on a local blog and you say, all right, this game's shutting down. Like, no, you have to let people know. And the fact that people are being told about this is even better. And this is why, like I said, you should be, if you voted for this, be happy you got into the Senate, because that is huge. And even you keep going here, it says, beginning on the date a digital game operator ceases to provide services necessary for the ordinary use of the digital game, the operator shall provide the purchaser with one of the more following: a version of the digital game that can be used by the purchaser, independent of services controlled by the operator, a patch or update to the purchaser's version of the digital game that enables its continued use independent of services controlled by the operator, and a refund in an amount equal to the full purchase price for the digital game by the purchasers. That's pretty big. And I remember, at least there was one person who was really against like Pirate Software, for instance. Actually, he's probably really mad this even got voted out. But regardless, what ended up happening is that I think one of the criticisms was, and it's been a little bit, was that essentially it's very hard on developers to like make a game with like network in mind first. Or no, sorry, you make a game like network first, and then it's really hard to trickle that down and preserve it. That was one of the arguments I remember, but it's been a while. So anyways, my counter to that always is that, one, as programmers, we always have to find a way to figure out a solution. That's literally what they ask you in every single like technical interview. Can you solve a problem? And guess what? This is a problem that can be solved. So It is what it is. And especially if you look at more like fan projects where they do like smaller servers and stuff without the support of like the big publishers, you can see that yeah, it's very possible to keep games alive. And I even heard stuff like the original like Final Fantasy 14. I never played that, but the original version of the game, you can still play it if you want. There's of course some hoops you gotta go to, but it's still possible. And even when I switch it with the Crew Unlimited, people have proven time and time again if they're willing to put in the time to do it and keep it alive, that these developers can do it as well. But sorry, publishers. Sorry, developers are not entirely to blame for that. So I'm just saying, developers, I keep saying developers, publishers are very lazy people. Like they are very lazy people, and they just want to get the bottom line as quick as humanly possible. So yeah, that's kind of like where we're at in terms of that. It's kind of like a side tangent aside though that I kind of want to mention as well is that I don't know what's up with certain things, but man, game preservation is one of the hardest things to keep alive. And this is a separate topic entirely, but a bit ago I covered this thing called the Myriad Archive that was getting slammed like DMCA's and stuff, where a bunch of old games that were there were really hard to keep up, and it was all like done by like one guy. There's other issues such as like keeping up the cost and stuff, and luckily something like the Minerva Archive came out later, and we got good news about that, which is good to rejoice. But either way, it's still very frustrating when video game preservation is so hard, and it's not even asking for much, okay? Because the whole point of Stop Killing Games was to get stuff functional. It's supposed to be in a functional state after you're not going to use it anymore. We're not asking you to keep the game maintaining for all of eternity. It's not realistic. Okay, people move on to projects, people move on. That's fine. But to leave a game in a functional state should be allowed. Even look at something like Concord, okay? Despite how trash that game was, and despite how awful it was received and how nobody played it, Sony literally pulled the plug on it. I don't think Concord should be taken out ever, okay? I want to play Concord to see how bad it was, though then again, actually, I kind of don't. But still, like, people want to be able to play old games and try old bad games as well. So you don't have to spend, like, $60 or something to just keep a game alive. You know what I mean? But yes. So now you might be asking me, why is this significant? Well, dear viewer, this is very significant, especially in California, because once it's in one state, it will have a ripple effect to a lot of other places, especially because the petition went by in the EU. You could even make the argument, at least maybe in a PR sense or like a public sense, that, oh, this one made a lot of progress within the EU. Maybe we can even pass it over here because looking at it, oh, it's pretty reasonable. It's a pretty reasonable demand. So why not? So that's kind of like where we're at. And of course, there's been stuff like lobbyists and stuff and people of that nature trying to push back against it. But the truth of the matter is, like I said, it's not a problem that's like insanely difficult, or at least maybe not insanely difficult, but like it's not something that's impossible. That's a better idea. It's not impossible to do it. Because if you ever have made any form of like software, developed anything, you can make a lot of like offline versions. Because I remember there's a project I was working on where the application can literally work off. Like I designed it in a way to work off local storage. You know what local storage is? That's literally stuff stored in your browser. So stuff like that, I was able to make it. So trust me, these developers, stop saying developers. My God, these publishers know it's possible, but they just refuse to let people work on it. So that's kind of what I'm saying. But anyways, so yeah, this is really good progress. I like hearing stuff like this. It just makes you realize that not all hope is lost. Okay, and I was just complaining about like prices going up and stuff. So at least now I know that instead of worrying about a Steam Deck all day, I can worry about this. Not that I was going to buy a Steam Deck, but you get the point. So yeah, really, really great progress. One last thing I want to just touch on is the fact that just because it only worked in California, just don't believe it won't work anywhere else. So I say, if Stop Killing Games comes to you in your area, and actually on their website, if you actually take a look right now, there's a part where they say where petitions are like added. So for instance, if you go, you can actually see right here where it says 10 plus legislative inquiries. It talks about formal government actions or legal proceedings initiated across multiple countries. So you have Europe, you have UK, you have Canada, you have the USA, you have Australia, you have France, Germany, and you have Brazil. So that is what I'm telling you, literally why it's so important to at least take some action. So really, really good stuff, I have to say. But yes, don't let these publishers gaslight you thinking it's impossible. No, it's not. It's literally, as a developer or as any person who's working It's literally your job to solve problems. It's literally a skill that you need to have. So it's not something that's impossible. Please get that nonsense out of here. But anyways, that's about it for me today. I just want to share this progress because this is really, really good, aside from the slight tangent. But yes. Finally. Good news, guys. Good news. Besides, this channel's not all doom and gloom. We like to have fun on here. We like to give you good news. So if you did that, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow my social networks below. But that's it for today. I'll see you next one. Ciao, ciao.